The sky above Dodson Outpost burned crimson at dawn, a color I had come to associate with impending disaster. Not that anyone would listen to a maintenance technician's superstitions. I wiped condensation from the viewport and counted the orbital defense satellites. 6 visible today, 2 fewer than yesterday. Ravi, Supervisor Jason's voice crackled through my comm unit. Are you daydreaming again? Atmospheric regulator in Section 9 is dropping efficiency. I sighed, turning away from the viewport. On it, Supervisor. The corridor stretched before me, dull metal walls bearing the scars of 15 years of human occupation on Cabria. 15 years since Earth went silent. 15 years of calling ourselves the last human colony in existence, though nobody knew for certain. I ran my fingers along the maintenance panel as I walked, feeling the subtle vibrations that told me more about the colony's health than any diagnostic. The atmospheric regulators were old, cannibalized from the original landing ships and repurposed a dozen times over by our chief engineer Johnson. Like everything else in Dodson Outpost, they were failing. My toolkit jangled against my hip as I descended into the lower levels. Temperature rose with each ladder I climbed down. Section 9 housed the agricultural domes, and the heat and humidity were necessary for the crops, even if they made maintenance work a sweaty, uncomfortable affair. Technicians like me existed in a peculiar space within the colony hierarchy. We weren't part of the administrative council that made decisions, nor were we scientists whose expertise was valued, or security personnel who commanded respect. We were the invisible hands that kept everything running, noticed only when something broke down. The regulator access panel was already open when I arrived at Section 9, and I found Dr. Daniel Jefferson kneeling beside it, his lab coat stained with condensation. Dr. Jefferson, I said, surprised. You shouldn't be tampering with the equipment. He looked up, dark eyes intense beneath his close-cropped silver hair. At 63, he was one of the oldest colonists and the only biologist who'd survived the journey from Earth. Ravi, he said, standing with a fluid grace that belied his age. Good. I need you to see something. My stomach tightened. The last time Dr. Jefferson had shown me something, it had been microscopic evidence of the local fauna evolving to consume our synthetic building materials. The council had classified the information and doubled the maintenance schedule without explanation to the general population. Is this about the regulator? I asked hopefully. No. He glanced over his shoulder, then lowered his voice. The regulator is fine. I reported the issue to get you down here. I blinked. That's a serious violation of protocol. There's something growing in the ventilation system, he interrupted. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that isn't from this world or ours. A chill ran through me despite the section's warmth. Alien contamination? We should alert quarantine control immediately. No. His hand closed around my wrist with surprising strength. The council has been filtering certain information. I need someone I can trust to verify what I've found before I go official. Trust was a rare commodity in Dodson Outpost. In a closed system of 500 humans with dwindling resources, political maneuvering had evolved into an art form. Dr. Jefferson had always struck me as above such things. Why me? I asked. His expression softened slightly. Because you see patterns others miss, because you understand systems, and because your father trusted you. The mention of my father, one of the original mission scientists who died in the second year of colonization, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, the overhead lights flickered, once, twice, then stabilized. Power fluctuation, I said automatically. Third one this week. Dr. Jefferson's gaze remained fixed on mine. That's not a power fluctuation, Ravi. It's them. They're testing our systems. Them? The word felt strange on my tongue. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small sample container. Inside was what appeared to be a metallic filament, iridescent under the light, moving with a sinuous, almost liquid motion. I believe, he said quietly, that we are not alone on Cabria. And I don't think we ever were. A distant alarm began to sound. The perimeter breach warning. It had been so long since I'd heard it that it took me a moment to recognize the pattern. Dr. Jefferson didn't look surprised. "It's starting," he said. "And we're not ready." The overhead lights flickered again, longer this time, plunging us into darkness for several heartbeats before emergency lighting bathed the corridor in a ghostly blue glow. "What's starting?" I demanded, pulse quickening. "What do you know?" He pressed the sample container into my hand and closed my fingers around it. "Find Shannon in engineering and Miguel in communications. Show them this. Tell them Protocol Cassandra is active." The main lighting returned, and with it Supervisor Jason's voice over the general comm. "All non-essential personnel return to quarters immediately. This is not a drill." Dr. Jefferson was already moving toward the exit. "Whatever happens, Ravi, remember that adaptation is survival. That's what your father always said." As he disappeared through the doorway, I looked down at the container in my hand. The filament had changed. It was now branching, creating intricate patterns against the clear walls of its prison. The colony's structural integrity alarm joined the perimeter breach warning, their discordant wail echoing through the corridor as the floor beneath my feet began to tremble. I had maintained enough failing systems to recognize one on the brink of collapse. Dodson Outpost, humanity's last colony, our final foothold in the cosmos, was beginning to fall apart. And according to Dr. Jefferson, someone or something was helping it along. I pocketed the sample and ran toward engineering, the crimson light of Cabriya Zeta 4's dawn now streaming through every viewport, painting the corridors the color of blood. The end had begun, and I was just a maintenance technician carrying a message no one would want to hear. Shannon Kwan was already elbow-deep in an electrical panel when I burst into engineering, breathless from running through 3 sections of the colony. The emergency protocols had shut down the lifts, forcing me to use the maintenance ladders. "Rabbi?" She looked up, surprise evident on her face. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and smears of conductive gel marked her cheeks. "You shouldn't be here. Didn't you hear the—" "Protocol Cassandra," I interrupted, pulling the sample container from my pocket. "Dr. Jefferson said to find you." The color drained from her face. She abandoned her tools and pulled me into a small alcove away from the other technicians. "Daniel gave you this?" Her voice dropped to a whisper as she examined the container. The metallic filament inside had continued to change, now forming what looked like a miniature circuit board. 10 minutes ago, he sent me to find you and Miguel in communications." Shannon's eyes narrowed. "Miguel was reassigned yesterday. Security took him for special duty. No one's seen him since." A chill ran down my spine. "The council?" "Most likely." She pocketed the sample. "They've been removing people who ask too many questions, or people who might know answers." The overhead speakers crackled to life. Captain Ellington's voice, usually calm and reassuring, now carried an edge of tension that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "This is not a drill. All personnel must return to designated shelter areas. Colony defenses have detected multiple approaching objects of unknown origin. I repeat, this is not a drill." Shannon grabbed my arm. "We need to move. Now." "To communications?" "No." She shook her head. "To Sublevel 8. My breath caught. Sublevel 8 was officially decommissioned after a structural failure 3 years ago. Unofficially, rumors circulated about strange noises and equipment disappearing down there. "That's restricted," I said. "Everything important is restricted, Ravi." She pulled a security badge from inside her jumpsuit. It wasn't her usual technician ID. This one had command-level encryption coding. Your father knew that, too. Before I could respond, the first impact hit. The entire colony shuddered, metal groaning under stress. Emergency alarms blared, different from the perimeter breach warning. This was the hull integrity alarm. Something had breached our outer defenses. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. Shannon didn't answer. She was already moving, pulling me along corridors I rarely visited, using her badge to override security locks that should have stopped even senior personnel. "How do you have clearance for this?" I asked as we descended yet another maintenance shaft. "I don't," she replied grimly, Not officially. Your father created backdoors in the system before he died. Only a few of us know. The mention of my father again. First Dr. Jefferson, now Shannon. It couldn't be coincidence. What aren't you telling me? I demanded, stopping on the ladder. What does my father have to do with this? Shannon looked down at me, her expression unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. He was the one who found them first, 6 months after we landed. The council decided to keep it classified. Found what? Who? She continued down, the original inhabitants of Cabria. I followed her in stunned silence. All my life, I'd been told that Cabria was uninhabited when we arrived. Harsh, barely habitable, but empty of intelligent life. We reached the bottom of the shaft, emerging into a corridor that didn't match any schematic I'd ever seen. The walls here weren't the standard prefabricated panels of the colony. They were smoother, with a faint iridescent quality that reminded me of the filament in Dr. Jefferson's sample. "This isn't our technology," I whispered. "No." Shannon pressed her hand against a section of wall. It responded to her touch, illuminating in a pattern that spread outward like ripples in water. "It's theirs. They've been here all along, Ravi, under our feet, inside our walls, watching, learning." The wall slid open, revealing a chamber that took my breath away. The circular room was filled with equipment, some recognizably human, some utterly alien. Displays flickered with data streams I couldn't interpret, and in the center stood a column of what appeared to be liquid metal, constantly shifting and reforming, and beside it stood Dr. Daniel Jefferson and a woman I'd never seen before. Tall and lean, with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone used to command. She wore a security uniform with captain's insignia, but not the current design. This was from the original mission. "Captain Kriegsman," Shannon said by way of introduction. "She commands the resistance." "There is no resistance," I said automatically. The council is comprised of puppets," Captain Kriegsman cut in, her voice hard-edged. "Half of them aren't even human anymore." I stared at her. "What?" Dr. Jefferson stepped forward. "The filament I showed you is a prototype neural interface. The Cabrians use it to integrate with other species. The council members who advocated for peaceful contact were the first to be converted." "Converted?" I repeated numbly. "Hijacked is a better word," Captain Kriegsman said. "Their bodies function as before, but their minds serve the Cabrian collective." The colony shuddered again, more violently this time. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "They're accelerating their timeline," Shannon said. "They must know we've gathered." "Can someone please tell me what's happening?" I demanded. Dr. Jefferson sighed. "The Cabrians have been studying us since we arrived, learning our technology, our biology, our social structures. They're silicon-based life forms with a hive consciousness, utterly alien to us in every way, but adaptable, incredibly adaptable. They see us as a threat," Captain Kriegsman continued, "and an opportunity. Our colony's defenses have been systematically sabotaged from within. The atmospheric satellites your father helped design, half of them have been reprogrammed to poison our air supply when activated." My head spun. "If they're already inside the colony, why attack from outside?" "Distraction," Shannon said. "Keep everyone focused on the external threat while they complete their internal takeover." The metal column in the center of the room pulsed, and strange symbols appeared on the surrounding displays. "They're moving through the colony's environmental systems," Dr. Jefferson translated. "Section by section, converting as they go." "Converting what?" I asked. "People," Captain Kriegsman said flatly. "Everyone in the residential quarters. That's why the lockdown, to keep everyone in place." Horror washed over me as I realized the magnitude of what was happening. "There are 300 people in those quarters." "Yes." Dr. Jefferson's face was grim. "And within the hour, they'll all be part of the collective." I thought of Supervisor Jason, of Johnson and the other engineers, of the families and children I passed in the corridors every day. All of them, their minds erased and replaced. "We have to warn them," I said. Communications are jammed, Shannon replied. That's why Miguel was taken. He discovered the signal interference pattern. Captain Kregsman placed her hand on the alien console. We've been preparing for this, Ravi. For 15 years, your father designed fail-safes before they took him. The words hit me like a physical blow. Took him? My father died in an airlock malfunction. That's what they wanted you to believe, Dr. Jefferson said gently. He discovered their presence in the colony's systems and threatened to expose them. They couldn't allow that. The room fell silent except for the soft pulsing of the alien technology. I struggled to process everything I'd learned. My entire understanding of the colony, of my own history, had been built on lies. "What's Protocol Cassandra?" I finally asked. Captain Kregsman smiled thinly. "The Greeks didn't believe Cassandra's warnings about the Trojan horse. Your father named our contingency plan after her." She gestured to Shannon, who removed a small device from her pocket. It looked like a standard data core, the kind used in the colony's mainframe, but with modifications I didn't recognize. "This contains a virus designed to target the Cambrian neural network," Dr. Jefferson explained. "It will sever their connections to converted humans and disrupt their hive mind temporarily. And we need you to deploy it," Shannon added. I blinked. "Me? Why not one of you?" "Because you're the only one who can access the central environmental controls without triggering alarms," Captain Kregsman said. "Your maintenance credentials are still valid in their system. And," Dr. Jefferson added quietly, "because you're your father's child, he built in biometric safeguards. The deployment system will only respond to his DNA signature, or one closely related." The weight of responsibility settled over me. I was just a maintenance technician, invisible, insignificant in the colony hierarchy. Now these people, these leaders of a resistance I never knew existed, were telling me I was the key to humanity's survival. Another impact rocked the colony, stronger than the previous ones. The lights flickered and a new alarm joined the cacophony, the atmospheric contamination warning. "They've started the conversion process," Dr. Jefferson said urgently. "We're out of time." Captain Kregsman fixed me with an intense gaze. "Your father believed in you, Robbie. He said you see patterns others miss. Now we need you to see the path forward." Shannon placed the data core in my palm. It felt impossibly heavy for such a small device. "The central environmental hub is 3 levels up," she said. "We'll create a diversion to draw their attention, but you'll need to move fast." I looked at the 3 of them, Shannon with her illegal security badge, Dr. Jefferson with his forbidden knowledge, Captain Kregsman, who was supposed to be dead according to official records. Rebels fighting a secret war against an enemy I hadn't known existed until today. "What if I fail?" I asked. Dr. Jefferson's expression softened. "Then humanity's last colony falls, and with it, our species." I closed my fingers around the data core, feeling its edges press into my palm. "Tell me exactly what I need to do." As they outlined the plan, the colony trembled around us, metal groaning under assault from both outside and within. The last human colony, my home, was under attack, and somehow its fate now rested in the hands of a maintenance technician who had only wanted to fix a broken regulator. The crimson light of Cabria Zeta 4 filtered through the few remaining viewports, painting everything the color of blood. Dawn had fully arrived, and with it, our final stand. The maintenance tunnels had never felt so confining. I crawled through narrow ducts designed for repair drones, the data core secured in my breast pocket, each movement measured to avoid detection. Above me, the colony shook with repeated impacts. Below, in the secret chamber, Captain Kregsman and the others would be initiating their diversion. I paused at a junction, consulting the mental map of Dodson Outpost that every technician develops through years of service. The central environmental hub was 2 sections north, accessible through a service corridor that would bypass the main hallways where the Cambrians would likely have established surveillance. A strange vibration ran through the metal around me, different from the impact tremors. I pressed my palm against the wall and felt it, a rhythmic pulse that reminded me of the liquid metal column in the resistance base. The walls themselves were changing. I moved faster. The service corridor was eerily empty when I dropped down from the duct. Emergency lighting cast alternating pools of shadow and dim blue illumination. The hub's entrance loomed ahead, its control panel glowing with active warnings. I approached cautiously, scanning for movement. My maintenance credentials should get me through the door, but after that, the data core felt heavy in my pocket. One insertion into the primary console, Dr. Jefferson had explained. The virus would propagate through the environmental systems, disrupting the Cambrian neural network. Simple in theory, nearly impossible in execution. I swiped my ID across the panel. The door hissed open. Inside the hub was a cathedral of machinery. Towering air processors, water reclamation units, and atmospheric regulation systems that kept 500 humans alive on an otherwise hostile planet. And standing at the central console, his back to me, was Supervisor Jason. I froze. He shouldn't be here, no one should be except essential environmental techs, and they'd been evacuated during the first alarm. Ravi! He didn't turn around. You're out of your assigned section. His voice was wrong, flat, without the usual irritation or urgency. I took a silent step backward. We've been expecting you. Now he turned, and I had to stifle a gasp. Dark metallic lines traced across his skin like circuit pathways, centering at his temples and running down his throat to disappear beneath his collar. His eyes reflected the emergency lighting with an unnatural sheen. Not Jason anymore. One of them. Your resistance colleagues are quite predictable, he continued, advancing slowly, attempting to disrupt our integration through the environmental systems. A logical approach, but flawed. My hand closed around the data core in my pocket. We just want to survive. Survival is precisely what we offer. The thing wearing Jason's face smiled without warmth. Integration is survival. Separate, your colony will fail within a decade. Resources dwindling, systems failing. Together we can exist indefinitely. More of them were coming. At the cost of our humanity, I said, stalling for time, looking for an opening to reach the console. Humanity is inefficient. Individual consciousness is wasteful. He was close enough now that I could see the metallic filaments moving beneath his skin. Your father understood this eventually, after sufficient reprocessing. Rage flared through me at the mention of my father. You killed him. We improved him, as we will improve you. I lunged sideways, attempting to circle around to the console, but Jason, or the thing controlling him, moved with inhuman speed, blocking my path. The collective anticipated your actions, he said. Your thought patterns are similar to your father's, logical but constrained by emotional attachments. A deafening explosion rocked the colony. The diversion had begun. The lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness I made my move. I dropped to the floor, rolling past Jason toward the console. His hand caught my ankle with crushing force, but I kicked free, scrambling forward on hands and knees. The console was 3 meters away. 2, 1. I slammed into it, fingers fumbling for the data port Dr. Jefferson had described. Jason's footsteps approached rapidly behind me. Integration is inevitable, his voice came, closer now. While prolonged the suffering, my fingers found the port. I pulled the data core from my pocket. Something sharp pierced my shoulder. A tendril of living metal extending from Jason's hand. Pain lanced through me as it burrowed deeper, seeking my nervous system. The data core nearly slipped from my grasp. Your father resisted too, Jason's voice whispered in my ear. He screamed your name at the end. With the last of my strength, I slammed the data core into the port. Nothing happened. Did you truly believe we wouldn't adapt to your primitive virus? Jason laughed, the sound utterly devoid of humanity. We've had 15 years to study your technology. The tendril in my shoulder pulsed, sending waves of cold numbness down my arm. I could feel it spreading, reaching for my spine, my brain. In moments, I would become like Jason, a puppet hosting an alien consciousness. We've been monitoring your resistance since its inception, he continued. You're Dr. Jefferson, you're Captain Krigsman, all their plans known to us, all their movements tracked. I thought of Shannon and the others walking into a trap. The data core had failed, protocol Cassandra had failed, and I had failed. Then I saw it, a maintenance panel beneath the console, the kind that housed the manual override systems for critical infrastructure, the kind that technicians like me knew intimately, but command-level personnel rarely bothered with. As the numbness crept toward my neck, I reached for the panel with my good arm. Jason was still talking, explaining how they would use the colony's resources to expand their collective consciousness beyond Cabria. My fingers found the emergency release latch. With a grunt of effort, I pulled it. The panel swung open, revealing a simple analog system, physical switches and mechanical connections that predated the colony's digital infrastructure. Old technology, reliable technology, the kind my father would have trusted. "Stop," Jason commanded, realizing too late what I was doing. I flipped the master override switch, cutting power to the digital systems. The console went dark. The hub's lighting failed. For one terrifying moment, everything was still. Then the backup systems engaged pure mechanical processes, triggering chemical reactions. Emergency atmospheric purge. A fail-safe designed to clear contaminants in case of catastrophic pollution. A different alarm sounded. 3 short pulses followed by a long tone. The atmosphere cycling warning. "What have you done?" Jason's voice held something new. "Uncertainty. Adaptation is survival," I gasped, echoing Dr. Jefferson's words, my father's words. We adapted. The air around us began to shimmer as the purge chemicals dispersed through the ventilation system. The tendril in my shoulder recoiled, withdrawing with a sickening slither. Jason staggered backward, his face contorting. "This compound, it disrupts our neural pathways," he said, metallic tendrils writhing beneath his skin. "How did you—" "My father designed it, specifically for you." I pulled myself upright, fighting through the pain. "Invisible maintenance technicians have access everywhere. We see everything, including how to kill you." The chemical compound, colorless, odorless, harmless to humans but devastating to silicon-based neural networks, continued to spread through the colony's air supply. I could hear shouts and confusion from distant corridors as the Cabrian-controlled humans lost their connections. Jason collapsed to his knees, the metallic lines beneath his skin darkening, becoming inert. His eyes cleared, confusion replacing the alien sheen. "Ravi?" he whispered, his voice his own again. What's happening?" Before I could answer, the colony-wide communication system crackled to life. Captain Krigsman's voice echoed through the hub. "Attention all colony personnel, this is Acting Captain Krigsman. The external attack has been neutralized. Repeat, the attack has been neutralized. Report to medical for evaluation and remain calm. The danger has passed." Jason looked down at his hands, at the now dead metallic pathways visible beneath his skin. I remember everything they made me do. I helped him to his feet. "It wasn't you, but I was aware, trapped in my own body." His voice broke. "Everyone was. All of us, screaming silently while they used us." The hub doors slid open. Shannon stood there, flanked by resistance members wearing improvised security uniforms. Dr. Jefferson pushed through, medical kit in hand. "It worked," he said, examining the dead tendrils in Jason's skin. "The purge compound is neutralizing the Cabrian neural interfaces." "What about the external attack?" I asked. Shannon's smile was grim. "Once their internal network collapsed, the external forces retreated. They're a hive mind. They can't function with part of themselves severed." "They'll be back," Captain Krigsman said, joining us. "But we'll be ready next time." Dr. Jefferson began treating my shoulder, applying a regenerative gel to the wound left by the tendril. "Your father would be proud, Ravi. You saw the solution none of us could see. Not a virus in the digital system," I said, "but a toxin in the mechanical one." "Precisely," he nodded. "They were so focused on our advanced technology that they overlooked the basics, the manual overrides, the physical fail-safes." "The invisible systems," I added, "maintained by invisible people." Captain Krigsman placed a hand on my uninjured shoulder. Not invisible anymore. The council members who weren't compromised have agreed we need a new approach to colony leadership, one that values all perspectives. Outside the hub, I could hear the sounds of the colony coming back to life. People emerging from quarters, medical teams deploying, repair crews assessing damage. The immediate crisis had passed, but the future remained uncertain. What now? I asked. Now, Dr. Jefferson said, we rebuild, we adapt, we prepare. Shannon handed me a security badge, not stolen this time, but official, with my name and a new designation, Systems Integration Specialist. The Cabrians taught us one valuable lesson, she said. Everything is connected. Environmental systems, defense networks, communication arrays, they all affect each other. We need someone who sees the patterns. I took the badge, feeling its weight, the weight of responsibility. And the Cabrians? I asked. Captain Kriegsman's expression hardened. They're still out there, watching, waiting. But now we know they exist. Now we can fight. Through the viewport I could see the crimson light of Cabria Zeta 4 giving way to the brighter illumination of mid-morning, the color of blood fading to the color of fire. Protocol Cassandra, I murmured. Named after the prophet no one believed, Dr. Jefferson said. But we believed in you, Ravi, and you delivered the warning that saved us all. I looked down at my new badge, then out at the colony. Damaged but standing, populated by humans who had narrowly escaped becoming something else entirely. The last human colony had survived its first true test, and I, a maintenance technician who had once been invisible, had helped make it possible. The battle was won. The war, I suspected, had only just begun. 3 months after the Cabrian incursion, life in Dodson Outpost had found a new rhythm. The colony bore its scars visibly. Sections still sealed off due to structural damage, makeshift repairs where proper materials were unavailable, and the haunted looks in the eyes of those who remembered their time under Cabrian control. My new role as Systems Integration Specialist kept me busier than I'd ever been as a maintenance technician. Today I was recalibrating the long-range communications array, a task that had been neglected for years. The colony had stopped actively listening for signals from Earth or other potential human settlements long ago. Hope had dwindled with each passing year of silence. "This is a waste of resources," Counselor Warren said, watching me work from the doorway of the communications hub. She had been one of the few council members not compromised during the incursion, though her traditional viewpoints remained unchanged. "We need to focus on immediate survival, not chasing ghosts." I continued adjusting the array's receptor sensitivity. Captain Kriegsman approved this project. "Kriegsman is an idealist," she scoffed. "Earth is gone. Any other colony ships are long dead. We're it, Ravi." "The sooner everyone accepts that, the sooner we can focus on making this place sustainable." I didn't argue. The new colony leadership was still finding its equilibrium, with Captain Kriegsman and the former council members often at odds about priorities. My position straddled both worlds, respected for my role in saving the colony, but still viewed with suspicion by those who preferred the old hierarchy. Counselor Warren's eventually left, and I continued working in peaceful solitude. The communications array was fascinating technology, designed to detect and decode signals across vast distances of space, filtering out the natural radio emissions of stars and cosmic phenomena. As I fine-tuned the frequency modulators, I found myself thinking about my father. Had he sat in this very chair, listening for signs of life from a silent Earth? Had he harbored hope even as he discovered the Cabrian threat beneath our feet? A soft chime from the console interrupted my thoughts. I almost dismissed it as system feedback from my adjustments, but it came again, more insistent. I froze, hands hovering over the controls. The signal tracker was registering something. Weak but unmistakably artificial. Not the random noise of space, but a pattern. A deliberate pattern. For several heartbeats I couldn't move. Then training kicked in. I began the standard protocols for signal verification, half expecting it to dissolve into cosmic background radiation or Cabrian interference. It didn't. The signal strengthened as I refined the receptor alignment. Binary code, old Earth format. My heart pounded as I initiated the decryption sequence. "Ravi," Shannon's voice came from the doorway, "you missed the engineering briefing." I didn't look up. "I need you to verify something." She moved to my side, peering at the console. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to disbelief. "Is that?" "Human," I confirmed, voice barely above a whisper. "Definitely human." The decryption completed, converting the binary to text. A simple message, repeating on a loop. UHFS colony, vessel Ogden, to any human settlement. Critical systems failing. 326 souls aboard. Bringing gridance coordinates follow. Shannon's hand gripped my shoulder. "It can't be." But it was. Another human ship. Survivors. "We need to tell Captain Craigsman," she said. I was already calculating the Ogden's position based on the signal strength and the coordinates in their transmission. "They're not far, astronomically speaking, less than a light year out." "That's impossible," Shannon said. "All the colony ships launched together. They should be scattered across different star systems by now." I ran the numbers again. Based on their trajectory, they've been traveling in a wide arc. Some kind of navigational failure, maybe. They've been adrift for years. The implications hit us simultaneously. A colony ship meant supplies, technology, expertise, resources our struggling outpost desperately needed. But it also meant bringing more humans to a planet where we now knew we weren't alone, where an alien intelligence had already tried to subsume us once. "Can they make it here?" Shannon asked. I input the data into our astronomical modeling system. With proper course correction and assuming their engines are still functional, yes. They have enough velocity, they'd need to use Cabria Zeta 4's gravity well for deceleration, but it's possible. We stared at each other, the magnitude of the discovery settling over us. For 15 years we had believed ourselves to be humanity's last outposts. Now, suddenly, we weren't alone. "We should respond immediately," Shannon said. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the transmitter controls. "Should we? The Cabrians are still out there. We're bringing these people into danger." "We can't make that decision for them," she replied. "They deserve to know what they're heading toward, the good and the bad." "Counselor Warrens and others will argue against it," I pointed out. "They'll say we barely have enough resources for ourselves." "And Craigsman will argue that we have a moral obligation," Shannon countered. "This is bigger than resource calculations, Ravi. This is about whether humanity survives as more than just our small outpost." I knew she was right. The discovery would fracture our already fragile leadership. Some would see the Ogden as salvation, others as a threat to stability. Captain Craigsman arrived minutes after we sent for her, Dr. Jefferson close behind. Their expressions mirrored our own stunned disbelief as they read the transmission. "Have you responded?" Craigsman asked. "Not yet," I said. "We wanted your authorization first." She paced the small space of the communications hub, military training evident in her precise movements. "This changes everything. If we bring them here, we're putting them at risk," Dr. Jefferson pointed out. "The Cabrians could return at any time, and we still don't fully understand their capabilities." "If we don't bring them here, we're condemning them to death in space," Craigsman countered. "Their systems are failing. They have nowhere else to go." I pulled up the resource calculations I'd been running in the background. Based on their reported numbers and our current supplies, we could integrate them without immediate crisis. It would accelerate our timetable for agricultural expansion, but it's feasible. "And it would nearly double our skilled workforce," Shannon added. Dr. Jefferson remained skeptical. "What do we tell them about the Cabrians?" "Everything," Craigsman said firmly. "They deserve complete information to make their choice." "And if they choose to come anyway?" I asked. Craigsman's gaze turned to the viewport, where Cabria Zeta 4 burned in the black void of space. "Then we prepare. We learn from what happened before. We build better defenses." "The Council will need to vote," Dr. Jefferson reminded her. "Let them," Craigsman said. "But we're sending a response now. These are human beings asking for help. We don't leave them in the darkness. I turned to the transmission console and began composing our reply. The fate of 326 souls now hung on what I would tell them. About our colony, about the Cabrians, about the dangers and possibilities of Cabria. As I worked, I thought about my father again. He had helped build this colony, believing it was humanity's last hope. Now I was extending that hope to others, even knowing the risks. The first words came easily. Outpost Omega to UHFS Ogden. We receive you. You are not alone. What followed was harder. The truth about our struggle, about the Cabrian threat, about our limited resources, but also about our resilience, our technologies, our determination to serve. When I finished, I looked to Craigsman for approval. She read it over, nodded once, and said, "Send it." I pressed the transmission key, sending our message racing across the void toward the Ogden. It would take hours to reach them, hours more for their reply. "Now we wait," Shannon said. "And prepare," Craigsman added, "whatever they decide." As we left the communications hub, I found myself filled with a strange mixture of hope and dread. The colony, my home, stood at a crossroads. The arrival of the Ogden could strengthen us immeasurably, or it could bring disaster, drawing the Cabrians back before we were ready. In the corridor outside, I passed Supervisor Jason. The medical nanites had removed most of the physical evidence of his Cabrian control, but occasionally in certain light, I could still see the faint tracery of where the metallic tendrils had been, a reminder of what we'd survived and what might come again. "You look troubled," he observed. I considered keeping the discovery to myself until the council had been officially notified, but secrets had nearly destroyed us once before. "We received a transmission," I said, "from another colony ship. They're alive, Jason. 326 people." His eyes widened. "Coming here?" "That's what we need to decide, or rather, what they need to decide once they know everything." He was silent for a moment. "They should know what it felt like, to be taken over, to watch yourself hurt others." I included a full account of the incursion, I assured him. No details spared. He nodded, seeming satisfied. "Good. Because if they come here," his voice hardened, "they need to understand what we're up against, what humanity is up against." As I continued toward my quarters, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. The message I'd sent could save 326 lives or condemn them to something worse than death. And our colony, just beginning to heal, would face a new test, either finding a way to accommodate hundreds of new members or living with the knowledge that we'd turned away our own kind. The sky outside the viewport was darkening as Cabria rotated away from its star. Soon it would be night, with only the ambient glow of the colony's external lights holding back the absolute darkness. Somewhere out there the Ogden drifted, its passengers now reading our message, making the most important decision of their lives. And somewhere, perhaps, the Cabrians watched and waited, their alien consciousness calculating, adapting. I entered my quarters and sat at my terminal, setting an alert for any response from the Ogden. Then I did something I hadn't done since my father died. I began keeping a journal. Future generations, whether from our colony or the Ogden or somewhere else entirely, would need to know what happened here, how humanity fought for survival on a hostile world, how we faced an alien intelligence that saw us as both threat and opportunity, how we refused to surrender even when we thought we were the last. My first entry was simple. Today we are no longer the last human colony. Today hope returned. Whether that hope would lead to salvation or disaster remained to be seen. 6 weeks after our first contact with the Ogden, I stood among the crowd gathered at Dodson Outpost's eastern landing zone. The colony ship's response had come just hours after we'd sent our message, carrying 5 simple words that had echoed through our collective consciousness ever since. A slim shot beats none at all. They had chosen to come despite our warnings, despite knowing about the Cabrians, despite understanding that Cabria might be as much a death trap as a sanctuary. The sky above burned amber as Cabria Zeta 4 dipped toward the horizon. Our sensors had been tracking the Ogden's approach for days as it used our star's gravity well to decelerate. Now, finally, it was making its final descent. "Nervous?" Shannon asked, joining me at the observation platform. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if we've doomed them? What if they save us?" she countered. 326 new minds, new perspectives, new skills. Captain Craigsman stood at the front of the platform, flanked by council members both old and new. Even Councillor Warrens had eventually come around, recognizing the potential benefits of integration despite her initial resistance. Dr. Jefferson approached, his medical team assembled behind him with portable diagnostic equipment. "The quarantine protocols are in place. We'll screen everyone before they enter the main colony. Not for Cabrian influence," I said. "For standard pathogens." He nodded. "We don't want to alarm them immediately, but yes, we'll be discreetly monitoring for any signs of neural interference." The colony's defense systems remained on high alert. No one believed the Cabrians would allow such a significant event to pass unnoticed, though we'd detected no sign of activity since the incursion. A bright flare appeared in the darkening sky, the Ogden's engines firing one final time to slow its descent. The massive ship, 3 times the size of our original colony vessels, emerged from the clouds, trailing vapor from its heat shields. The crowd fell silent as the Ogden settled onto the landing zone with surprising grace for something so large. Its hull bore the scars of decades in space: micrometeorite impacts, radiation discoloration, makeshift repairs. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, with a hydraulic hiss, audible even at our distance, the main airlock cycled open. A ramp extended and figures appeared in the doorway. The first to emerge was a tall man in a captain's uniform that hadn't been regulation for at least 20 years. His gray hair was cropped short, his posture rigid despite obvious exhaustion. "Captain West Charles," he announced as he reached the bottom of the ramp. "UHFS colony vessel Ogden." Craigsman stepped forward. "Captain, Rebecca Craigsman, Dodson Outpost." "Welcome to Cabria." They clasped hands firmly and a cheer erupted from both the colony crowd and the Ogden passengers now flooding down the ramp. The integration began immediately, a controlled chaos of medical screenings, resource inventories, and housing assignments. I found myself coordinating communications between the colony systems and the Ogden's still functional computer core, which contained technical data that might help address some of our most pressing infrastructure problems. Hours into the process, I was deep in the Ogden's engine room, documenting the components we might salvage, when someone spoke behind me. "You're not cataloging the plasma injectors correctly." I turned to find a woman about my age standing in the doorway. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her jumpsuit, though worn, was meticulously maintained. The name Tool was stitched across the breast pocket. "I'm sorry?" She stepped forward, taking the tablet from my hands. "You're marking them as grade C salvage. They're at least grade B. There's a difference of about 30% efficiency." I blinked. "You're an engineer?" "Ella Toole, drive system specialist." She returned the tablet, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, though lately I've been whatever the Ogden needed me to be. We were running with a skeleton crew for the last 5 years. Ravi Koppler, systems integration specialist. I offered my hand, which she shook firmly, though until recently I was just a maintenance technician. "No such thing as just a technician when you're keeping people alive in space," she said. "Or on a potentially hostile planet." Something in her easy confidence reminded me of my father. "How much did they tell you about what happened here?" Her expression grew serious. "Everything in your transmission. The Cabrians, the infiltration, your counterattack." She paused. Captain Charles considered looking for another destination, but most of us figured if you could fight them off once, we stood a chance together. We spent the next several hours working side by side, cataloging the Ogden's viable systems and discussing how they might integrate with Dodson Outpost's infrastructure. Ella had a brilliant mind for engineering problems, finding connections and solutions I would have missed. "Your colony managed remarkable adaptations with limited resources," she observed as we finished. especially that atmospheric purification system you described. Necessity, I said. Though it was my father who designed the original failsafe, she nodded thoughtfully. On the Ogden, we had different challenges. Navigator malfunction sent us off course early in the mission. By the time we corrected, we were too far from our intended destination with diminishing fuel. How did you survive this long? Hibernation rotations. Most of the colonists spent years in cryosleep while skeleton crews maintained essential systems. Her eyes clouded. We lost people, more than I care to remember. As we walked back toward the main colony, passing groups of Ogden arrivals being shown to temporary quarters, I found myself drawn to Ella's resilience. Here was someone who understood what it meant to keep fighting when all hope seemed lost. I'd like to show you something, I said impulsively. If you're not too tired. She raised an eyebrow. Does it involve more inventory lists? Something infinitely more interesting. I led her to the small laboratory Dr. Jefferson had set up after the incursion, a space dedicated to studying Cambrian biology based on the inert samples we'd collected. Most colonists avoided the lab, preferring not to confront physical reminders of what had nearly destroyed us. Your alien neighbors, Ella said, examining the sealed containers of metallic filaments. Not particularly friendly from what I gather. We still don't fully understand them, I admitted. Silicon-based life forms with collective consciousness. They communicate through a neural network that can interface with carbon-based life, including humans. She leaned closer to one of the specimens. You said they retreated after your counterattack, but you expect them to return? It's only a matter of time. They want this planet. They want us, either to eliminate or assimilate. She straightened, meeting my gaze directly. Well then, we'd better find a better way to fight them before they come back, hadn't we? Over the next weeks, as the Ogden colonists integrated into Dodson Outpost, Ella and I fell into a natural partnership. During the day, we worked on merging the colony's systems with salvaged Ogden technology. In the evenings, we often found ourselves in Dr. Jefferson's lab, studying the Cambrian samples, looking for weaknesses we might have missed. The Ogden had brought not just people and materials, but knowledge, scientific databases and research that had been lost to Dodson Outpost when Earth went silent. Ella had a talent for connecting seemingly unrelated pieces of information, creating new paradigms where others saw only disparate facts. One night, nearly a month after the Ogden's arrival, I found her in the lab alone, staring at a microscope display with unusual intensity. Ella? Look at this, she said without looking up. I tried something. I joined her at the display, the Cambrian sample. One of the neural filaments was clearly degrading, its edges dissolving into inert particles. What did you do? I had a thought. She straightened, excitement evident in her voice. The Ogden's medical database included records of early nanobot experiments for medical applications. They used silver particles as antibacterial agents. Silver? I asked, confused. Yes, I noticed structural similarities between these filaments and certain types of bacteria, so I introduced a silver nitrate solution to the sample. She gestured at the display. This was the result. I stared at the dissolving filament. Silver kills them. Not just kills them, her eyes were bright with discovery. It breaks down their neural communication network. The silver ions disrupt the electromagnetic fields they use to maintain cohesion. The implications were staggering. During the incursion, we'd found a way to temporarily disable the Cambrian neural interfaces, but not to permanently neutralize them. If silver could do that, how much silver do we have in the colony? I asked. Not much, Ella admitted. It wasn't a priority resource for either colony mission, but the Ogden's industrial fabricators could synthesize silver nanoparticles from raw materials. We'd need to find a source. I thought for a moment. The geological surveys from the colony's early days, there were mentions of various mineral deposits within excavation range. We never pursued them because they weren't essential for survival. They are now, she said firmly. We brought our discovery to Captain Craigsman and Dr. Jefferson the next morning. Within days, a joint team of original colonists and Ogden arrivals began geological sampling at sites identified in the old surveys. 2 weeks later, they found it. A vein of silver-bearing ore 10 kilometers from the colony. Extraction began immediately. As we developed weapons and defenses incorporating silver, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. Throughout human history, silver had been used to ward off mythical monsters, vampires, werewolves, evil spirits. Now, on a planet orbiting a distant star, it would protect us from very real creatures who sought to consume our minds. "Do you think they know?" Ella asked one evening as we watched the first batch of silver nanoparticle solution being synthesized in the Ogden's fabrication lab. "That we found their weakness?" "If they're monitoring us, maybe," I said. "But their arrogance may be our advantage. They underestimated us before." She took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. Over the past weeks, our professional partnership had evolved into something deeper. A connection forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you told me about the Cabrians, how they view individuality as inefficient. Yes, perhaps that's their greatest weakness, not just silver, but their inability to value individual consciousness." Her eyes met mine. "They'll never understand why we fight so hard to remain ourselves." Before I could respond, the colony's alert system activated. Not the blaring alarm of immediate danger, but the low-frequency pulse that indicated unusual sensor readings. We rushed to the operations center, where Captain Kriegsman and Captain Charles were already reviewing the data. "Movement in the western ridge," Kriegsman reported. "Metallic signatures consistent with Cabrian activity. They've been watching," Charles added, his voice grim. "And now they're moving." I looked at the sensor display, at the expanding cluster of metallic signals converging toward the colony. After months of silence, the Cabrians had returned. "How long until they reach us?" I asked. 12 hours at their current pace," Kriegsman said. Ella stepped forward. "The silver countermeasures? Being distributed now," Charles confirmed. "Defense teams are deploying to the perimeter." I exchanged glances with Ella. The silver weapons and shields were still being produced, not yet tested in actual combat. We had theories, not certainties. "They chose their timing well," I observed. "Before we could fully prepare, but not before we discovered their weakness," Ella countered. "We may not be fully ready, but we're not helpless." Kriegsman looked at each of us in turn, her expression resolute. "We've beaten them once, we'll do it again, this time permanently." As the colony mobilized for battle, I found myself thinking about the message the Ogden had sent in response to our warning. A slim shot beats none at all. They had gambled everything on that slim shot, traveling to a world they knew harbored an alien threat. Now that threat was advancing, and we would face it together, the original colonists who had survived the first incursion and the newcomers who had chosen to join our fight. The Cabrians had wanted to strip us of our individuality, to absorb us into their collective. Instead, they had forged us into something stronger, a community of individuals united by common purpose, each bringing unique perspectives and skills to the challenge before us. As Ella and I joined the teams distributing silver-infused weapons, I realized that the real strength of humanity wasn't just in our ability to adapt, but in our capacity to come together without surrendering our individual selves. The Cabrians were coming, but this time, we had more than just courage and desperation on our side. We had knowledge, we had silver, and we had run out of mercy for the creatures that sought to erase us. Dawn would bring battle, and with it, perhaps, the true beginning of humanity's future on Cabria. Dawn broke over Dodson Outpost with the familiar crimson light of Cabria Zeta 4, painting the horizon the color of blood. It seemed fitting for what was to come. The colony was in full defensive posture. Every able person, original colonist and Ogden arrival alike, had a role to play. Children and essential personnel were secured in the deepest levels of the colony, protected by multiple barriers treated with silver nanoparticles. Ella and I stood at the western perimeter, overlooking the ridge where our sensors had detected Cabrian movement. The silver-infused weapons felt strange in my hands, lightweight but deadly, at least in theory. We'd modified atmospheric dispersal drones to deploy silver nitrate clouds, while ground teams carried pressurized canisters that could project silver particles in targeted streams. "There," Ella said, pointing to the horizon. "At first I saw nothing. Then the movement caught my eye, a rippling across the landscape, like heat distortion but more deliberate. The ground itself seemed to flow, metallic tendrils rising and falling in rhythmic patterns as the Cabrian collective advanced. They're not hiding this time," I observed. "They want us to see them coming." "Intimidation tactics," Ella replied. "They think their numbers will overwhelm us." Captain Kriegsman's voice came through our comms. "All teams, hold positions. Let them come to us." Standing beside her at the command post, Captain Charles added, "Remember your training. The silver is our advantage. Make it count." The Cabrians continued their advance, covering ground with unnatural speed. As they drew closer, I could make out the distinct forms within the collective mass, not individuals exactly, but specialized components of the greater whole. Some were massive bulbous structures that pulsed with internal energy. Others were slender whip-like appendages that lashed the air. "They've evolved," Dr. Jefferson's voice noted over the comm. "Adapted new forms since our last encounter." The first Cabrian entities reached the outer perimeter markers, simple posts embedded in the ground at 500-meter intervals. As they passed the first line, the colony's new defense system activated. Silver-infused charges detonated, sending clouds of microscopic particles into the air. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The Cabrians caught in the silver cloud convulsed, their metallic surfaces bubbling and dissolving like acid had been poured over them. High-pitched frequencies assaulted our comms. Their version of screaming, perhaps. "It's working," Shannon reported from her monitoring station. "Their neural network is destabilizing." But the main body of the collective surged forward, sacrificing their advance units without hesitation. They adapted in real time, forming protective shells around their more vulnerable components. "Second line, prepare to engage," Kriegsman ordered. Our team readied the pressurized canisters. As the Cabrians reached the 300-meter mark, we fired in coordinated bursts. Silver mist shot forth in precise arcs, cutting through the Cabrian defenses. Where the particles made contact, the alien forms dissolved into inert puddles. For a moment it seemed we might halt their advance entirely. Then the ground beneath our feet began to vibrate. "Seismic activity," someone shouted over the comm. "No," I realized with sudden clarity. "They're not just coming from the ridge, they're beneath us." Before I could warn the others, the earth erupted 20 meters behind our line. Cabrian forms surged upward, cutting off our retreat. We were surrounded. "Fall back to secondary positions," Kriegsman commanded. Ella grabbed my arm. "We can't go back. We'll have to go through them." She was right. We switched to our backup weapons, silver-edged blades for close combat, and charged toward the thinner section of the Cabrian line ahead of us. The battle became chaos. All around, colonists fought desperately against the encroaching Cabrians. The silver weapons were effective, but the aliens' numbers seemed endless. For every one we dissolved, 3 more took its place. Ella and I fought side by side, cutting a path toward the colony's main entrance. My arms burned with exertion, my lungs struggled in the dust-filled air. A Cabrian tendril lashed out, catching my leg. Pain seared through me as it began to burrow through my protective gear. Ella slashed it with her blade, dissolving the connection. "Keep moving!" We finally reached the entrance, joining a group of defenders forming a last line. Captain Charles was there, his uniform torn and stained with the metallic residue of dissolved Cabrians. "They've breached the western quadrant," he reported grimly. "We're losing ground." Through the chaos of battle, I noticed something odd. The Cabrians weren't just attacking randomly. They seemed to be converging on specific points around the colony. "The old mining shafts," I realized. "They're targeting the original excavation sites from when the colony was established." "Why?" Ella asked, dispatching another Cabrian entity that ventured too close. Before I could theorize, Dr. Jefferson's voice broke through on the emergency channel. "Everyone fall back to the central hub immediately. I found something. The database from the Ogden about this planet's history. We're a little busy, Doctor, Kriegsman replied tersely. You don't understand, he insisted. The Cabrians aren't native to this planet. They're weapons, self-replicating silicon-based weapons left behind by someone else. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Weapons? Left by whom? Unknown, Jefferson replied. But the Ogden carried archaeological records from Earth that mentioned similar silicon-based structures found on Mars, dormant, but with the same neural network architecture. They were estimated to be millions of years old. Are you saying we're fighting ancient alien weapons? Charles demanded. Yes, Jefferson confirmed, and I believe they're trying to access their central control node. The mining shafts we abandoned, they lead to a deeper chamber we never fully explored. Our early scans detected unusual metal deposits, but we lacked the resources to investigate. Ella's eyes met mine, understanding dawning between us. If they reach their control node, they could fully activate, I finished. Become even more dangerous. Captain Kriegsman made a rapid decision. All teams converge on the original mining complex. We need to reach that chamber before they do. We fought our way across the colony, collecting survivors as we went. The Cabrians seemed to sense our intent, redoubling their efforts to reach the abandoned mining complex at the northern edge of Dodson Outpost. The entrance to the mines had been sealed years ago, but the Cabrians had already torn through the barrier. We descended into darkness, our helmet lights illuminating the narrow passage. Silver weapons at the ready. The main chamber should be 200 meters ahead, I said, recalling the old survey maps. The tunnel widened, opening into a vast underground cavern that none of us had seen before. Our lights couldn't reach the ceiling, creating the disorienting sensation of standing in an infinite void. And, at the center of the chamber stood a structure that was clearly not natural. A crystalline obelisk that pulsed with inner light, sending out ripples of energy that made the air itself shimmer. That's it, Dr. Jefferson breathed, having joined our group despite Kriegsman's objections, their control node. Cabrians were already converging on the obelisk, their forms merging with its base. With each addition, the light pulsed stronger, and the ground beneath our feet trembled. We need to destroy it, Charles said. Now! Ella unshouldered the pack she'd been carrying. Our emergency measure. Inside was a concentrated silver nitrate explosive, powerful enough to take down a section of the colony if necessary. If we place it at the base of the obelisk, she explained, the blast should disperse enough silver to neutralize both the node and any Cabrians in the chamber. But we'd need to trigger it manually, I pointed out. The detonator's range isn't sufficient to clear the tunnels in time. The unspoken implication hung in the air. Someone would have to stay behind. I'll do it, Kriegsman volunteered immediately. No, Charles countered. Your people need you. I'll stay. As they argued, I caught Ella's eye. A silent communication passed between us, the kind that only comes from two minds perfectly in sync. There's another way, I said, interrupting the captains. The mining tunnels connect to the old ventilation system. If we could pump silver particles through the entire underground network simultaneously, we could neutralize all of them at once, Ella finished, including any we haven't found yet. The Ogden's atmospheric processors, Shannon added, having followed our group into the chamber. We could repurpose them to generate enough silver-laden air to flood the entire system. Kriegsman nodded decisively. Make it happen. The rest of us will hold them here. While the battle raged around the obelisk, Ella, Shannon, and I raced back to the surface. The Ogden's atmospheric processors were massive machines designed to create breathable air for 300 people during a decades-long space journey. Reconfiguring them took precious time, but between Ella's engineering skill and my knowledge of the colony's ventilation system, we managed to create a delivery method for the silver particles. Ready? Shannon reported, her hands flying over the control panel. The ventilation system is aligned, I confirmed. Every tunnel and chamber in the underground network will receive the silver mist. Initiating dispersal, Ella said, activating the processors. The machines hummed to life, drawing the silver nanoparticle solution into their cores and converting it to an aerosol. Powerful fans drove the silver-laden air into the ventilation shafts, forcing it deep underground. We monitored the progress from the control room, watching as sensors throughout the tunnel system registered the presence of silver particles. One by one, areas of the map turned from red to green as the air reached them. "The main chamber is still showing resistance," Shannon noted. "The concentration of Cabrians there is too dense." Ella studied the readings. "We need to increase the pressure, force more silver into that specific section. That would require shutting off all other outlets," I warned. "The pressure might damage the colonial infrastructure." "We don't have a choice," she replied. "If that control node fully activates." I nodded and began rerouting the ventilation system, closing off all pathways except those leading to the main chamber. The pressure gauges climbed rapidly into the red zone. "Structural integrity warnings in sections 5 through 9, Shannon reported. "Hold it together," I muttered. Whether to the colony or to myself, I wasn't sure. The minutes stretched like hours as we pushed the system beyond its designed limit. Then, suddenly, the readings from the main chamber changed. The resistance disappeared, replaced by a cascade of green indicators. "They're neutralizing," Ella said, excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. "It's working." We maintained the silver dispersal for another hour, ensuring complete saturation of the underground network. When we finally powered down the processors, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. Captain Kriegsman's voice came through on the comm, weary but triumphant. "The chamber is secure. The obelisk has changed. You should see this." We returned to the main chamber to find a transformed scene. Where the crystalline obelisk had stood, there was now only a pillar of inert material that looked more like stone than metal. The Cabrians were gone, dissolved into puddles of harmless silicon compounds. Dr. Jefferson was carefully examining the remains of the obelisk, his scanner recording data. "Fascinating. The neural network has completely collapsed. It's just ordinary matter now." Captain Charles approached us, his expression solemn. "We lost 96 people, but it could have been much worse." "Will they come back?" I asked. "Could there be more of them elsewhere?" "Based on what we've seen of their behavior, I don't think so," Dr. Jefferson replied. "This control node appears to have been the central hub for all Cabrian activity on this planet. Without it, any remaining entities would be dormant at best, incapable of coordinated action." "We should make sure," Ella said firmly. "The silver treatment should be extended to the entire colony perimeter." Kriegsman nodded. "Agreed. We'll adapt the atmospheric processors to create a silver perimeter around our settlement. No chances." In the weeks that followed, we implemented what colonists began calling Operation Silver Shield. The Ogden's fabrication units worked continuously to produce silver nanoparticles, which were dispersed across the colony's perimeter and incorporated into our building materials. Exploration teams, heavily armed with silver weapons, ventured further from the colony than ever before, mapping the surrounding terrain and searching for any signs of remaining Cabrian activity. They found none. 1 month after the battle, I stood with Ella at the edge of a new construction site. The combined population of Dodson Outpost and the Ogden crew had necessitated expansion, and we were building outward for the first time in years. "Hard to believe we're actually growing instead of just surviving," I remarked. Ella took my hand, a gesture that had become comfortingly familiar. "That's the thing about humanity. We adapt. We overcome. We build." Behind us, the colony hummed with activity. The Ogden was being systematically dismantled, its components repurposed for our new life on Cabria. Children played in areas that had once been restricted for security. The atmosphere of constant fear had lifted. "Dr. Jefferson's team made another discovery," Ella said. "The soil composition changes after silver treatment. It becomes more hospitable to earth plants." So the Cabrians were inhibiting agriculture. Apparently, their silicon-based biology competed with carbon-based life at a microbial level. She smiled. "The first wheat seedlings in the experimental field sprouted yesterday. Actual grain, Ravi. We might have bread someday." Such a simple thing, bread, yet it represented everything we had fought for. Not just survival, but a future, a life beyond mere existence. Captain Craigsman joined us, surveying the construction. The Council approved your proposal. We're going to seed silver dust across the entire northern continent using modified satellite dispersal systems. That's hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, I said, impressed. We're not taking chances, she replied. If those things were weapons left behind by some ancient conflict, there could be more of them buried elsewhere on the planet. Salting the earth, Ella mused, except in this case the salt brings life instead of preventing it. Craigsman nodded. The first dispersal launches tomorrow. We're calling it the Silver Dawn Initiative. As she walked away, Ella leaned against my shoulder. Silver Dawn, I like that. In the distance, Cabrilla Zeta 4 was setting, its crimson light softer somehow than it had been before. Perhaps it was just my imagination, or perhaps the silver in the atmosphere was already changing how we perceived our sun. You know, I said, my father always believed we could make a true home here, not just an outpost or a colony, but a place where humanity could put down roots and flourish. He was right, Ella replied, and so were the people of the Ogden. A slim shot beat no shot at all. Above us, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was Earth, silent for 15 years. Somewhere were other colony ships, perhaps struggling as the Ogden had. But here, on Cabrilla, humanity had found its footing at last. We had faced an enemy not of our making, remnants of some ancient conflict we might never understand. And we had prevailed. Tomorrow the silver dawn would break over a world being reclaimed, inch by inch. Our children, and their children after them, would walk under this red sun without fear, inheritors of the last human colony that refused to be the last after all. And if other threats awaited us among the stars, we would face them together, adapting, overcoming, surviving. It was what we did best. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to this story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.